The sound of breaking glass echoed through the Silver Spur saloon as Nora Reeves threw her whiskey tumbler against the wall, silencing every conversation in the crowded establishment on that sweltering July evening in 1882. Tom Barrett stood frozen in the center of the room, his hat clutched in both hands, his face flushed crimson beneath his tanned skin as he processed what had just happened. He had asked her to marry him in front of the entire town of Aspen, Colorado, and she had refused him with such vehemence that even the piano player had stopped mid-song. "I will not marry a man who thinks he can own me like one of his horses," Nora said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She was 22 years old, with dark auburn hair that cascaded past her shoulders and green eyes that could cut through a man's resolve like a hot knife through butter. She ran the general store her father had left her when he died 2 years prior, and she had no intention of giving up her independence for any man, no matter how persistent. Tom was 25, tall and broad-shouldered, with sandy brown hair and blue eyes that usually held a gentle warmth, but now reflected pure humiliation. He had worked the Barrett ranch with his father since he was old enough to sit a horse, and everyone in Aspen assumed he and Nora would eventually wed. They had grown up together, attended the same schoolhouse, and shared countless conversations on her front porch over the years. But Tom had made a critical miscalculation by assuming their friendship meant she would accept his proposal without question. "Nora, I did not mean," Tom started, but she cut him off with a sharp gesture. "You meant exactly what you said last week when you told your ranch hands that once we were married, I would close the store and focus on running your household. I heard about it from Sarah Jenkins, and I will not be spoken about as though my wishes mean nothing." The crowd in the saloon murmured among themselves. Tom felt every eye on him, judging him, pitying him. His face burned hotter as he realized how completely he had mishandled everything. He opened his mouth to apologize, to explain that he had been foolish and speaking without thinking, but before he could form the words, another voice cut through the tension. "Seems to me the lady has made herself clear, Barrett." Marcus Dalton stepped forward from the bar where he had been watching the entire scene unfold. He was a newcomer to Aspen, having arrived 3 months earlier with enough money to purchase the old Henderson property and establish himself as a gentleman rancher. He was handsome in a polished way, with dark hair slicked back with pomade, a carefully trimmed mustache, and expensive clothes that marked him as different from the working cowboys of the region. He was 28 and had immediately set his sights on winning Nora's affections, despite Tom's obvious interest in her. Tom's jaw clenched as Marcus approached Nora with a smooth confidence that made Tom's own earnest proposal seem clumsy by comparison. "Miss Reeves, if I may be so bold, a woman of your intelligence and independence deserves a man who appreciates those qualities rather than seeks to diminish them." Nora turned her attention to Marcus, and while she did not smile, she did not throw anything at him either. "Thank you, Mr. Dalton, though I require no man's permission to make my own decisions." "Of course not," Marcus agreed smoothly. "I merely wish to express my admiration for your strength of character." He offered her his arm. "May I escort you home?" The evening air might prove more pleasant than the current atmosphere. Tom watched, his heart sinking, as Nora hesitated only a moment before placing her hand on Marcus's arm. They walked past him toward the saloon doors, and Marcus paused just long enough to give Tom a look that was equal parts triumph and mockery. "Better luck next time, Barrett," Marcus said quietly, then led Nora out into the warm summer night. The saloon remained silent for several long seconds after they departed. Then, slowly, Conversations resumed in hushed tones as people discussed what they had just witnessed. Tom stood motionless, feeling as though the floor had dropped out from under him. His best friend, Jack Morrison, approached and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Come on, Tom. Let's get you out of here," Jack said, steering him toward the back door. Tom allowed himself to be led out into the alley behind the saloon, where the sounds of the town were muffled and the stars shone bright in the clear mountain sky. He leaned against the wooden wall and closed his eyes, replaying every mistake he had made. He had been so certain Nora would say yes that he had not considered what he would do if she refused. And now Marcus Dalton, that smooth-talking outsider with his fancy clothes and even fancier words, was walking her home. "I am an idiot," Tom said, his voice rough. "You are not an idiot," Jack replied, though his tone suggested he thought Tom had at least been foolish. "You just went about it all wrong. You should have talked to her privately, not made a public spectacle of asking her to marry you." "I thought she would be pleased by the grand gesture," Tom admitted. "All the other girls in town swoon over public proposals. Nora Reeves is not like all the other girls in town," Jack pointed out. "She never has been. That is part of why you love her, is it not?" Tom nodded slowly. Jack was right, of course. Nora had always been different, fiercely independent and determined to chart her own course. Those were the very qualities that had drawn Tom to her over the years, the fire in her spirit that made every conversation an adventure. And he had tried to extinguish that fire by suggesting she give up her store and become a traditional rancher's wife. "What do I do now?" Tom asked. Jack was quiet for a moment, considering. "You apologize. You explain that you spoke without thinking and that you respect her independence. And you give her time. If she truly cares for you, she will come around once she has had a chance to calm down." But even as Jack spoke those words, both men knew the situation had become more complicated. Marcus Dalton was now in the picture, and he had positioned himself as the man who understood and appreciated Nora in ways Tom apparently did not. The rivalry between them, which had been simmering beneath the surface for months, had just exploded into open competition. Tom spent a sleepless night at the ranch, tossing and turning as he replayed the evening's disaster over and over in his mind. By the time dawn broke over the mountains surrounding Aspen, he had resolved to make things right. He would go to Nora, apologize sincerely, and show her that he truly did respect her independence and her ambitions. He would prove that he was the better man, despite his clumsy proposal. He rode into town late in the morning after completing his essential chores at the ranch. The general store was already open, and through the front window he could see Nora behind the counter, helping Mrs. Peterson select fabric for a new dress. Tom waited outside until the older woman departed with her purchases, then stepped through the door. A small bell above the frame announced his arrival, and Nora looked up from arranging a display of canned goods. "We are open for business, but if you have come to make another scene, you can leave right now," she said, her tone cool but not hostile. "I came to apologize," Tom said, removing his hat. "Nora, I was wrong. I should never have assumed you would want to give up the store, and I definitely should not have discussed our potential future with my ranch hands before discussing it with you. I was thoughtless and arrogant, and I am truly sorry." Nora studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for the apology," she finally said. "But an apology does not change the fact that you clearly have expectations about what marriage would mean that do not align with what I want for my life." "Then tell me what you want," Tom said, taking a step closer. "Help me understand, because I swear to you, Nora, I do not want to take away your independence. I want to build a life with you, whatever that looks like." Before Nora could respond, the bell above the door chimed again, and Marcus Dalton entered carrying a large bouquet of wildflowers. He paused when he saw Tom, then continued forward with that same confident smile. "Miss Reeves, I hoped I might convince you to join me for lunch at the hotel restaurant," Marcus said, presenting the flowers. "I thought we might continue the pleasant conversation we began last evening." Tom felt his jaw clench, but he forced himself to remain calm. This was Nora's decision to make, and he would respect whatever she chose. Nora accepted the flowers with a small smile that made Tom's heart ache. "That is very kind of you, Mr. Dalton. I would be happy to join you for lunch." Marcus's smile widened, and he shot Tom a triumphant glance before offering Nora his arm once again. "Excellent. Shall we?" As they moved toward the door, Nora paused and looked back at Tom. "I appreciate your apology, Tom. I truly do, but I need time to think about what I want." Then they were gone, and Tom was left standing alone in the general store, feeling as though he had just lost something precious that he might never get back. Over the following weeks, Tom watched with growing frustration as Marcus courted Nora with a persistence and charm that seemed to be working. Marcus sent her gifts, took her to dinner at the finest establishment in town, and escorted her to the Sunday church socials. He was always impeccably dressed, always had the right words, and always treated her with a respect that emphasized her independence while simultaneously making it clear he was interested in far more than friendship. Tom tried to compete, but everything he did seemed clumsy by comparison. When he brought Nora flowers from his ranch, they were simple wildflowers that paled next to Marcus's elaborate bouquets from the Denver florist. When he invited her to dinner, she politely declined, saying she had already made plans with Marcus. When he tried to engage her in conversation, she was cordial but distant, as though the easy friendship they had once shared had been irreparably damaged by his failed proposal. The town watched the rivalry with great interest. Some folks sided with Tom, the hometown boy who had simply made a mistake. Others preferred Marcus, the sophisticated newcomer who treated Nora like a queen. The gossip in the saloon and the church and the general store itself centered on which man would ultimately win her heart. Jack Morrison tried to counsel patience, but Tom found it increasingly difficult to stand by and watch Marcus claim what he had always assumed would be his. It did not help that Marcus seemed to take pleasure in rubbing his success in Tom's face, always finding ways to mention his dates with Nora, or to be seen with her in public when he knew Tom would be watching. The situation came to a head in early September, when Marcus announced his intention to ask Nora to marry him. Word spread through Aspen like wildfire, and by the time Tom heard about it from Jack, Marcus had already purchased an expensive ring from the jeweler and made reservations for a private dinner at the hotel. "You have to do something," Jack said as they stood in the ranch stable, checking on the horses. "If you let him propose without making your feelings clear, you will regret it for the rest of your life." "What am I supposed to do?" Tom asked, his voice rough with frustration. "She has made her choice. Marcus is everything I am not: refined, wealthy, educated. He can give her things I never could." "Can he give her love?" Jack challenged. "Real love, the kind that comes from years of friendship and understanding? Or is he just offering her a pretty package with nothing substantial inside?" Tom considered his friend's words. He thought about all the years he had known Nora, all the conversations they had shared, all the moments when they had understood each other without needing to speak. He thought about the way her eyes lit up when she talked about expanding the general store, about her dreams of maybe opening additional locations in other towns someday. He thought about how much he admired her strength and determination, even when those qualities made things difficult between them. And he realized that Jack was right. He could not let Marcus propose without making one more attempt to show Nora how he truly felt. Not with a grand public gesture this time, but with honesty and vulnerability, and a willingness to listen to what she wanted. He rode into town the next day, determined to speak with Nora before Marcus could propose. But when he arrived at the general store, he found it closed, with a note on the door indicating that Miss Reeves was indisposed for the afternoon. Tom's heart sank as he realized what that meant. Marcus had moved up his timeline, and somewhere in Aspen, he was likely down on one knee at that very moment. Tom stood on the boardwalk outside the store, feeling helpless and angry and heartbroken all at once. A few townspeople passed by, giving him sympathetic looks that only made him feel worse. He was about to return to his horse when he saw Sarah Jenkins hurrying toward him, her face flushed with exertion. "Tom, thank goodness I found you," she gasped, catching her breath. "Nora is at the hotel with Marcus, and I think she is going to say yes." "I know," Tom said dully. "There is nothing I can do about it now." "Are you just going to give up?" Sarah demanded. "Tom Barrett, I have known you since we were children, and I have never seen you give up on anything that mattered to you. If you love her, fight for her." "She does not want me to fight for her," Tom said. "She wants to make her own choices." "Then let her make an informed choice," Sarah said. "Go to her. Tell her everything you feel. Let her decide with all the information, not just Marcus's pretty words." Tom looked at Sarah's earnest face and felt something shift inside him. She was right. He had given up too easily, assuming that Marcus's advantages made the outcome inevitable. But he owed it to himself, and more importantly to Nora, to be completely honest about his feelings before she made a decision that would affect the rest of her life. He strode toward the hotel with renewed purpose, his boots thudding against the wooden boardwalk. When he pushed through the doors of the hotel restaurant, he immediately spotted Nora and Marcus sitting at a corner table. Marcus was reaching across the table, taking Nora's hand in his, and Tom could see a small velvet box sitting between them. "Nora," Tom called out, his voice carrying across the restaurant. Everyone in the establishment turned to look at him, including Nora and Marcus. Nora's eyes widened with surprise, while Marcus's expression shifted from annoyance to outright anger. "Barrett, this is a private conversation," Marcus said coldly. "I need to talk to Nora," Tom said, ignoring Marcus and focusing entirely on her. "Please, just give me 5 minutes." Nora looked between the two men, clearly torn. Marcus squeezed her hand, his voice turning gentle and persuasive. "My dear, I am in the middle of asking you a very important question. Surely whatever Barrett has to say can wait." But Nora slowly withdrew her hand from Marcus's grasp and stood up. "I will be back in a moment," she told Marcus, then walked toward Tom. "Outside," she said quietly, and Tom followed her out onto the hotel porch. The afternoon sun was warm on their faces as they stood facing each other. Nora crossed her arms, her expression guarded. "Tom, what are you doing?" "You cannot just burst in every time, 'I love you,'" Tom interrupted, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I have loved you for as long as I can remember, and I am not talking about some romantic notion or wanting to own you or any of that. I mean I love who you are, your stubbornness, your independence, your dreams, all of it. I was an idiot to suggest you should give up the store, and I am an even bigger idiot for not fighting harder to show you that I understand what really matters." Nora's arms slowly dropped to her sides, and Tom saw her eyes glisten with unshed tears. "Tom, please, let me finish," he said. "I know Marcus can give you things I cannot. He has money and refinement and all the right words, but I can give you something else. I can give you a partnership, a real one, where we build our lives together without either of us giving up who we are. I can give you years of friendship and understanding, and a love that is not based on what you can be for me, but on who you already are. You hurt me, Nora said, her voice breaking slightly. When you proposed in front of everyone and talked about me giving up the store, you made me feel like you had never really seen me at all. I know, Tom said, taking a step closer, and I have regretted it every single day since. But Nora, I am asking you to give me a chance to prove that I have learned from my mistakes. I am not asking you to marry me right now. I am just asking you not to marry him without at least considering whether your heart truly wants Marcus or if you are choosing him because I let you down. Nora was quiet for a long moment, tears now streaming down her face. Tom reached up and gently wiped them away with his thumb, and she did not pull back from his touch. I do not know what I want, she whispered. I am so confused, Tom. Marcus has been nothing but perfect. He says all the right things, treats me with respect, never pressures me. But when I am with him, I do not feel the way I thought I would. I do not feel. You do not feel what? Tom asked gently. I do not feel the way I feel when I am with you, she admitted. Even when I am angry at you, even when you frustrate me beyond reason, being near you feels right in a way that nothing else does. But I am scared, Tom. I am scared that you will disappoint me again, that your traditional ideas about marriage will resurface, and we will end up miserable. I cannot promise I will never make mistakes, Tom said honestly. But I can promise that I will always listen to you, that I will always respect your choices, and that I will spend every day trying to be the man you deserve. Your store, your dreams, your independence, none of that threatens me. It is part of what makes you extraordinary. Nora looked up at him, searching his face for any hint of deception or doubt. What she saw there must have satisfied her, because she suddenly stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. Tom held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair and feeling like he could finally breathe properly for the first time in weeks. They stood like that for several long minutes, oblivious to the curious stares of people passing by on the street. When Nora finally pulled back, she looked up at Tom with red-rimmed eyes and a small smile. I should go back inside and talk to Marcus, she said. He deserves an answer, and it would not be fair to keep him waiting. Tom felt a flicker of fear that she might still choose Marcus, but he nodded. Whatever you decide, I will respect your choice. Nora squeezed his hand once, then turned and walked back into the hotel. Tom remained on the porch, his heart pounding as he waited to learn his fate. Through the window, he could see Nora returning to the table where Marcus sat with an expectant expression. He saw her sit down and begin speaking, though he could not hear the words. He saw Marcus's expression shift from anticipation to confusion to anger as Nora spoke. He saw her push the velvet box back across the table toward Marcus, and he saw Marcus stand up abruptly, his face flushed with fury. Marcus stormed toward the hotel entrance, and Tom instinctively stepped back to give him space. But Marcus did not simply walk past. He stopped directly in front of Tom, his eyes blazing with rage. You just could not let me have her, could you, Barrett? Marcus spat. You had to come in here with your pathetic declarations and ruin everything. Nora made her own choice, Tom said evenly. I did not force her to do anything. You manipulated her with your history together, playing on her emotions like the coward you are, Marcus accused. If you were any kind of man, you would let this be decided properly. What are you suggesting? Tom asked, though he had a sinking feeling he knew exactly where this was headed. A duel, Marcus said, loud enough that several people on the street stopped to listen. You and me tomorrow at dawn. The winner gets Nora. Tom felt anger flare in his chest. Nora is not a prize to be won, Dalton, and I am not going to fight you over a decision she has already made. Are you refusing? Marcus asked, his voice dripping with contempt. I should have known you were a coward. The insult stung, but Tom kept his temper in check. "Call me whatever you want, I am not fighting you." Marcus laughed bitterly. "Then everyone in this town will know that Tom Barrett is not only a fool, but a coward as well. And sooner or later, Nora will realize it too." With that, Marcus strode away, leaving Tom standing on the porch with a crowd of onlookers whispering among themselves. Tom knew this was not over. Marcus was humiliated and angry, and men like that were dangerous. Nora emerged from the hotel a few minutes later, her face pale. "Tom, I heard what Marcus said. Please do not fight him. He is just upset and he will calm down once he has time to think." "I know," Tom said. "I am not going to duel him, Nora. This is not the 18th century, and you are not property to be fought over." But even as he spoke those words, Tom knew the situation was more complicated than he wanted to admit. In the Wild West of 1882, challenges to duels were taken seriously, and refusing one could indeed damage a man's reputation. More importantly, Marcus's accusation of cowardice would spread through Aspen like wildfire, and it would affect not just Tom's standing in the community, but potentially Nora's as well. Over the next 24 hours, the town talked of little else. Jack Morrison came by the ranch that evening, his expression grave. "Marcus has been talking all over town," Jack reported. "He is telling anyone who will listen that you are afraid to face him, and he is implying that Nora only chose you because she knows you are weak and easy to control." Tom slammed his fist against the stable wall, causing his horse to shift nervously in its stall. "That is ridiculous. Nora is the strongest person I know. She does not need to control anyone." "I know that, and you know that, but gossip has a way of taking on a life of its own," Jack said. "People are starting to question whether Nora made the right choice. Some are even suggesting she should reconsider Marcus's proposal, since at least he was willing to fight for her." "This is insane," Tom said. "We are supposed to be civilized people, not barbarians." "Tom, I hate to say this, but you might need to accept his challenge," Jack said reluctantly. "Not because I think dueling is right, but because if you do not, this cloud will hang over both of you for years. Marcus will never let it go, and people will never stop whispering." Tom knew Jack was right, but the thought of fighting Marcus made him sick to his stomach. Not because he was afraid of Marcus. Tom was a skilled marksman and had been in enough scraps to know he could hold his own, but because the whole thing felt barbaric and wrong. Nora had made her choice freely, and that should have been the end of it. But when he rode into town the next morning to discuss the situation with Nora, he found a different atmosphere than he expected. A crowd had gathered in the street outside the general store, and Marcus was standing in the middle of it, speaking in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I have waited all night for Tom Barrett to show up and accept my challenge like a man," Marcus declared. "But he has not come. He hides at his ranch while I stand here ready to fight for the woman I love. What kind of man does that make him?" Tom dismounted from his horse and pushed through the crowd. "I am right here, Dalton, and I have already told you I am not going to fight you. Nora made her choice, and you need to accept it." "The lady made her choice based on incomplete information," Marcus said. "She chose a man who is too cowardly to defend his claim. If she saw you for what you really are, she might reconsider." Nora emerged from the general store at that moment, her face flushed with anger. "Stop this, both of you. Marcus, I am not interested in being with you, and I am certainly not interested in watching two men shoot each other over me like I am some kind of object. Tom, please, let us just go inside and let Marcus leave." But the crowd had grown larger, and Tom could see the expectation in their faces. They wanted a showdown, a dramatic resolution to the love triangle that had entertained them for months. And Marcus knew it, playing to the audience with theatrical gestures and loud proclamations. "Miss Reeves, I understand you are upset," Marcus said, his voice becoming gentler. "But a man must defend his honor and prove himself worthy of the woman he loves. I am willing to risk everything for you." "Is Barrett?" Tom felt the pressure of dozens of eyes on him. He looked at Nora and saw the fear in her face, the pleading in her eyes for him to walk away. But he also saw something else, a flicker of doubt, a question about whether his refusal to fight was truly about principle, or whether Marcus was right about him being a coward. And in that moment, Tom realized that as much as he hated the idea of dueling, refusing the challenge would haunt them both. The whispers would never stop, the doubt would always linger, and Marcus would use it to try to wedge his way back into Nora's life. Sometimes being the better man meant fighting even when you did not want to, not for glory or machismo, but to protect what mattered most. "All right, Dalton," Tom said quietly. "You want your duel, you have got it. Tomorrow morning at dawn east of town. But we do this properly, with seconds and a neutral party to oversee things. And when I win, you leave Aspen and never come back." Marcus's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Agreed. And when I win, you leave, and I will spend however long it takes convincing Miss Reeves that she deserves better than a man who could not even defend her honor properly." Tom wanted to argue that he was defending her honor now, but he kept silent. He had agreed to the duel, and now he had to prepare for it. He looked at Nora, expecting to see anger or disappointment, but instead he saw resignation and something that might have been understanding. That evening, Tom sat in his ranch house cleaning his pistol with methodical precision. Jack Morrison sat across from him, having agreed to serve as Tom's second in the duel. "Are you sure about this?" Jack asked. "It is not too late to back out." "Yes, it is," Tom replied. "I should have accepted the challenge immediately instead of trying to take the high road. All I did was give Marcus ammunition to use against both Nora and me." "You did what you thought was right," Jack said. "There is no shame in that." "Maybe not, but there is a cost," Tom said, "and I am tired of paying it. Tomorrow morning this ends one way or another." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Jack opened it to reveal Nora standing on the porch, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders against the cool evening air. "I need to talk to Tom," she said. "Alone, if you do not mind, Jack." Jack nodded and stepped outside, leaving Tom and Nora facing each other in the dim lamplight. She walked over to him, her expression a mixture of frustration and fear. "I do not want you to do this," she said without preamble. "Tom, please, just let Marcus talk. His words cannot hurt us if we do not let them." "You know that is not true," Tom said gently. "You saw the doubt in your own eyes this morning when Marcus called me a coward, and if there is doubt now, imagine what it will be like in a year, 5 years, 20 years. Every time we have an argument or things get difficult, that doubt will be there whispering that maybe you made the wrong choice." "So you are going to risk your life to prove something to me?" Nora asked, her voice breaking. "I am risking my life to prove something to both of us," Tom corrected. "I need to know that I can stand up and fight for what matters, even when it is hard. And you need to know that the man you chose is not afraid to face challenges head-on." Nora was quiet for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. "What if something goes wrong? What if Marcus kills you?" "He will not," Tom said with more confidence than he felt. "I am a better shot than he is, and I have more motivation. I am fighting for the life I want to build with you. He is just fighting out of wounded pride." Nora stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, holding on tight. "I love you, Tom Barrett. I should have said it before now, but I love you. And if anything happens to you tomorrow, I will never forgive Marcus, and I will never forgive myself." Tom held her close, feeling the warmth of her body against his and the wetness of her tears soaking through his shirt. I love you too, Nora. And after tomorrow, we can finally start our life together without Marcus hanging over us like a shadow." They stood like that for a long time, drawing strength from each other. When Nora finally left to return to her home above the general store, Tom felt more resolved than ever. This duel was not about machismo or proving his masculinity. It was about closing a chapter so that a new one could begin. Dawn came cold and gray, with mist rising from the mountain streams and dew heavy on the grass. Tom arrived at the designated spot east of town to find Marcus already there, along with a crowd of spectators who had apparently decided that watching two men potentially kill each other was appropriate Sunday morning entertainment. Jack Morrison stood at Tom's side, checking his pistol one last time. "Remember, stay calm, take your time with the shot, and do not let him get in your head." Marcus's second was a man named William Cross, a gambler who had arrived in Aspen with Marcus and seemed to serve as his assistant in various schemes. The neutral party overseeing the duel was Judge Harlan, one of the few people in town who had tried to talk both men out of this nonsense. "Gentlemen, I want to make one final attempt to resolve this peacefully," Judge Harlan said. "Mr. Barrett, Mr. Dalton, are either of you willing to withdraw your challenge and settle this like civilized men?" "No," Marcus said immediately. "This ends today." Tom looked at the crowd and saw Nora standing near the back, her face pale and drawn. He wanted to call the whole thing off for her sake, but he knew that would only make things worse. "I am ready," he said quietly. Judge Harlan sighed. "Very well. The rules are as follows. You will stand back to back, take 10 paces when I give the command, turn and fire. You each get one shot. If both of you miss or if you both survive your wounds, the duel is considered complete and honor is satisfied. Is that understood?" Both men nodded. Tom and Marcus positioned themselves back to back in the center of the clearing. Tom could feel his heart pounding in his chest, could hear the blood rushing in his ears. He thought about Nora, about the life they could have together if he survived this. He thought about his father and the ranch and all the things that made life worth living. "Begin pacing," Judge Harlan commanded. Tom started walking, counting each step in his head. 1, 2, 3. The morning air was crisp and clean. 4, 5, 6. A bird called from somewhere in the trees. 7, 8, 9. He reached for his pistol. 10. He spun around, raising his weapon, and saw Marcus doing the same. For a frozen instant, they stared at each other across 20 paces of ground, each with a gun pointed at the other's chest. Tom could see the determination in Marcus's eyes, but also something else, fear, maybe, or second thoughts about the path that had led to this moment. Tom thought about Nora's face, about her plea for him not to do this. He thought about what kind of man he wanted to be, not just for her, but for himself. And in that crystalline moment, he made a decision. He lowered his gun barrel slightly, aiming for Marcus's shoulder instead of his chest. It was still a dangerous shot, one that could kill if he missed and hit something vital, but it was not a killing shot by intention. The two pistols fired almost simultaneously, the reports echoing off the mountains. Tom felt a searing pain in his left side and staggered backward, but he stayed on his feet. Across from him, Marcus went down hard, clutching his right shoulder and screaming in pain. The crowd rushed forward, and Tom felt Jack's hands supporting him. "You are hit," Jack said urgently. "Let me see." Tom pressed his hand to his side and felt blood, but the wound did not feel as bad as it could have been. Marcus's shot had grazed him, tearing through his shirt and leaving a painful furrow along his ribs, but the bullet had not penetrated deeply. "Doctor." Anderson pushed through the crowd, his medical bag already open. He took a quick look at Tom's wound. "You will live, but we need to clean this and bind it up. Sit down before you fall down." Tom let Jack help him to the ground, but his eyes were on Marcus, who was surrounded by his own knot of people. Dr. Anderson moved over to Marcus next, and Tom heard him say, "The shoulder is shattered. You are going to need surgery, and you will never have full use of this arm again." Tom felt sick. He had not wanted to cause permanent damage, had not wanted any of this. But it was done now, and there was no taking it back. Nora appeared beside him, dropping to her knees and taking his face in her hands. "You foolish, wonderful, idiotic man," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was going to watch you die." "I am all right," Tom assured her, wincing as Dr. Anderson began cleaning his wound. "It looks worse than it is." "You shot him in the shoulder," Nora said. "You could have killed him, but you did not." "I did not want to kill him," Tom said. "I just wanted this to be over." Marcus was being helped to his feet, his face gray with pain and shock. He looked at Tom with an expression that was difficult to read: anger, certainly, but also something that might have been grudging respect. "You won," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "The lady is yours, Barrett. I hope you deserve her." "I am not anybody's prize," Nora said sharply, standing up and walking over to Marcus. "And neither of you had the right to fight over me like I was property. But since you both insisted on this barbaric display, I am glad it is finished. Marcus, you need to leave Aspen as soon as you are well enough to travel. I do not want to see you again." Marcus looked like he might argue, but the pain and the reality of his situation seemed to drain the fight out of him. He nodded once, then allowed William Cross and Dr. Anderson to help him toward the doctor's office. The crowd began to disperse, the excitement over and the moral questions too uncomfortable to linger on. Jack helped Tom to his feet, and Nora immediately positioned herself under his other arm, supporting him. "Let us get you back to the ranch so you can rest," Nora said. "You have lost blood and you need to lie down." "The ranch is too far," Dr. Anderson interjected. "Bring him to my office. I want to keep an eye on both of them for a few hours to make sure there are no complications." So Tom found himself in the doctor's office, lying on a cot with clean bandages wrapped around his ribs while Dr. Anderson stitched up the wound. Nora sat beside him the entire time, holding his hand and refusing to leave even when the doctor suggested she might be more comfortable waiting outside. "I am not going anywhere," she said firmly. "Tom risked his life because of me. The least I can do is sit with him while he recovers." In the other room, Tom could hear Marcus groaning as the doctor prepared him for surgery. The sound made Tom feel guilty, even though he knew Marcus had forced this confrontation. No one had won here today, not really. Marcus was injured and would be leaving town in disgrace. Tom was hurt and had been forced to shoot another man. And Nora had been put in the terrible position of watching two men fight over her against her wishes. "I am sorry," Tom said quietly. "I should have found another way." "No more apologies," Nora replied. "What is done is done. Now we move forward." Tom was released from the doctor's care by late afternoon, with strict instructions to rest and change his bandages daily. Jack drove him back to the ranch in his wagon, with Nora insisting on coming along to make sure he was settled properly. As they rode through the golden late-day sunlight, with the mountains rising majestically around them and the aspen trees beginning to show the first hints of autumn color, Tom felt a strange sense of peace. The duel was over, Marcus would be leaving, and he and Nora could finally begin their life together without interference or doubt. At the ranch, Nora helped Tom inside and got him situated in bed, despite his protests that he was not an invalid. She made him soup from the vegetables in his root cellar and sat with him while he ate, telling him about her plans for expanding the general store. "I want to add a section for farm equipment and tools," she said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. and maybe eventually open a second location in one of the mining towns to the north. There is real opportunity there if someone is willing to invest the time and effort. Tom listened, loving the passion in her voice and the way her entire face lit up when she talked about her business. This was the Nora he had fallen in love with, determined, ambitious, full of dreams. And now, finally, they could pursue those dreams together. "I want to help," Tom said. "Not take over or tell you what to do, but support you however I can. Maybe the ranch could supply some of the goods you sell, or we could work out partnerships with other ranchers in the area." Nora smiled, a real genuine smile that made Tom's heart soar despite the pain in his ribs. "I would like that. A real partnership where we both contribute and both benefit." "That is exactly what I want," Tom said. "A partnership in business and in life." They talked late into the evening, making plans and sharing dreams, until Tom finally drifted off to sleep with Nora still sitting beside him, her hand warm in his. Over the next 2 weeks, Tom recovered steadily from his wound. Nora visited the ranch every day, bringing him meals and spending hours talking about everything and nothing. They rediscovered the easy friendship they had once shared, but now it was deepened by love and the knowledge that they had fought for their relationship and won. Marcus left Aspen 10 days after the duel, his arm in a sling and his pride thoroughly crushed. He stopped by the general store before he departed, ostensibly to settle his account, but really, Tom suspected, to see Nora one last time. Tom happened to be there, helping Nora reorganize some shelves now that his wound had healed enough for light work. He tensed when Marcus walked in, but Nora put a calming hand on his arm. "Let me handle this," she said quietly, then moved behind the counter to face Marcus. "I came to say goodbye," Marcus said, his voice lacking its usual smooth confidence, "and to apologize for my behavior. I should never have challenged Barrett to a duel or put you in that position." "No, you should not have," Nora agreed, "but I appreciate the apology. I hope your arm heals and that you find happiness wherever you go next." Marcus glanced at Tom, then back at Nora. "He is a lucky man." "I hope he knows that." "I do," Tom said, stepping forward to stand beside Nora. "And I plan to spend the rest of my life proving I deserve that luck." Marcus nodded once, then turned and walked out of the general store for the last time. Tom and Nora watched through the window as he climbed into his wagon and drove away, heading east toward Denver and whatever future awaited him there. "You feel sorry for him?" Tom asked. "A little," Nora admitted, "but mostly I just feel relieved. Now we can finally focus on us without all the drama and complications." That afternoon, Tom asked Nora to take a walk with him. They strolled through Aspen, greeting neighbors and stopping to admire the autumn colors that were beginning to paint the mountainsides in shades of gold and red. Eventually, they found themselves on the outskirts of town, near a small grove of aspen trees that had been their special spot when they were children. "I used to come here and think about the future," Tom said, looking up at the white bark trees with their trembling leaves. "I would imagine what my life would be like, who I would become, who I would love, and you know what? Every single one of those visions included you." Nora turned to face him, her eyes soft. "Tom, wait, let me finish," Tom said, taking both her hands in his. "I know I already proposed once, and I did it all wrong. I made assumptions and put you on the spot and basically did everything the exact opposite of how I should have. So this time, I want to do it right." He dropped to one knee, mindful of the lingering soreness in his side, and looked up at her. "Nora Reeves, you are the strongest, smartest, most incredible woman I have ever known. You challenge me, frustrate me, inspire me, and make me want to be a better man. I do not want to own you or change you or make you give up any part of who you are." I just want to build a life with you, side by side, partners in every sense of the word. Will you marry me?" Nora looked down at him, and tears began streaming down her face. But she was smiling, that beautiful, radiant smile that made everything else fade away. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Tom Barrett, I will marry you." Tom stood up and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the pent-up emotion of the past months. She kissed him back with equal passion, and for a long moment, nothing else existed except the two of them and the love they shared. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and laughing, Nora wiped the tears from her face. "We are really doing this, getting married. If you will still have me," Tom said. "I will," Nora confirmed, "but I have conditions. I keep the general store and run it as I see fit. I am involved in decisions about the ranch, and we are partners in truth, not just in name." "Agreed to all of it," Tom said without hesitation. "In fact, I was thinking we could build a new house between the ranch and town, close enough that you can easily get to the store every day, but with enough land that we could expand the ranch operations if we wanted to." Nora's eyes lit up. "That is actually a wonderful idea. And we could have stables there, maybe even start a horse breeding program. I have always thought there was a market for quality horses in the mining towns." They spent the rest of the afternoon sitting under the aspen trees, making plans and dreaming about their future together. By the time they returned to town, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that reflected off the mountain peaks. News of their engagement spread through Aspen quickly, and this time, the response was universally positive. The townspeople had watched Tom and Nora navigate the complicated situation with Marcus, had seen them fight for their relationship, and now celebrated their decision to marry. Sarah Jenkins organized a party at the church hall, and nearly everyone in town attended to offer their congratulations. Jack Morrison pulled Tom aside during the celebration, a broad grin on his face. "You did it, you stubborn fool. You actually won her back." "I never really lost her," Tom replied, watching Nora across the room as she laughed with a group of ladies. "We just needed to figure out what we both wanted and how to build a life that worked for both of us." "That sounds far too mature and reasonable," Jack joked. "What happened to the Tom Barrett who punched Jimmy Wilson in the nose for insulting your sister?" "He grew up," Tom said with a smile. "It took a while, but he finally figured out that being a man is not about fighting or proving yourself to everyone else. It is about knowing who you are and what matters, and having the courage to stand up for those things even when it is hard." The wedding took place 6 weeks later, on a crisp October morning when the Aspens were at the peak of their autumn glory. Nora wore a beautiful white dress that she had ordered from Denver, simple and elegant, and perfectly suited to her practical nature. Tom wore his best suit, his hair carefully combed and his boots polished to a shine. The ceremony was held in the small church where they had both attended services since childhood. Reverend Matthews officiated, speaking about love and partnership and the sacred bond of marriage. When it came time for the vows, Tom spoke from the heart. "Nora, I promise to love you not in spite of your independence and strength, but because of it. I promise to support your dreams as much as my own. I promise to listen when you talk, to respect your decisions, and to be your partner in all things. And I promise that every day for the rest of our lives, I will work to deserve the incredible gift of your love." Nora's voice was strong and clear as she spoke her own vows. "Tom, I promise to love you with all my heart, to build a life with you that honors both of us, and to never let pride or fear keep me from telling you what I truly feel. I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your wife, through good times and bad, through challenges and triumphs. And I promise that I will never take for granted the man who had the courage to fight for us. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in applause. Tom kissed Nora, a sweet, tender kiss that held the promise of all the years to come, and then they walked down the aisle hand in hand, married at last. The reception was held at the church hall, with food and music and dancing that lasted late into the evening. Tom and Nora shared their first dance as husband and wife, swaying together while Jack Morrison played his fiddle and the rest of the town clapped along. "I love you," Tom whispered in Nora's ear as they danced. "I love you too," Nora replied. "And I am so glad I said no that first time, because it made us figure out what we really wanted before we made this commitment." "I am glad too," Tom admitted, "though I could have done without the duel and the bullet wound." Nora laughed, the sound like music. "Consider it a learning experience. Now you know never to make assumptions about what I want." "Trust me, lesson learned," Tom said. They spent their wedding night in the hotel in Aspen in the finest room available, though neither of them much cared about the accommodations. They were too wrapped up in each other, in the joy of finally being together without obstacles or doubts, to notice anything else. The next morning, they began moving Nora's things from her apartment above the general store to the ranch house, though Tom made it clear that it was now their ranch house, not just his. They spent the following weeks settling into married life, learning each other's habits and rhythms, and discovering the joy of waking up together every morning. True to his word, Tom supported Nora's business ambitions. He helped her expand the general store, adding the farm equipment section she had envisioned and working with other ranchers in the area to supply goods. The store became more profitable than ever, and Nora began seriously planning for a second location in one of the mining towns to the north. For his part, Tom found that having Nora as a partner improved the ranch operations significantly. She had a head for numbers and organization that he lacked, and together they streamlined their processes and increased their productivity. They also began the horse breeding program Nora had suggested, purchasing quality breeding stock and developing a reputation for raising excellent working horses. The first winter of their marriage was cold and snowy, but they hardly noticed, too wrapped up in each other and their shared projects. They spent long evenings by the fireplace, making plans and telling stories and simply enjoying being together. Tom learned that Nora was surprisingly sentimental, keeping small tokens from important moments in their relationship. Nora discovered that Tom had a beautiful singing voice that he only shared when he thought no one was listening. Spring brought new life to the ranch, with foals being born and the first crops being planted. It also brought news that delighted them both. Nora was pregnant. They shared the news with Jack Morrison first, who immediately demanded to be named godfather, then with the rest of the town, who celebrated with another party at the church hall. Tom was simultaneously thrilled and terrified by the prospect of becoming a father. He fretted about Nora's health, insisting that she not overwork herself at the store. Nora tolerated his hovering with good humor, though she made it clear she was not going to become a delicate flower just because she was carrying a child. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she reminded him when he tried to convince her to stay home instead of going to the store. "I am perfectly capable of managing both a pregnancy and a business." "I know," Tom said. "I just worry about you." "Then worry productively by helping me organize the inventory," Nora replied with a smile. "That way you can keep an eye on me and be useful at the same time." Their son was born in late autumn of 1883, during the first snowfall of the season. The labor was long and difficult, and Tom paced the floor of their bedroom while Dr. Anderson attended to Nora. When he finally heard the baby's first cry, he burst into the room despite the doctor's protests and rushed to Nora's side. She looked exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "We have a son," she said, her voice hoarse from exertion but filled with joy. "Tom, we have a son." Tom looked down at the wrinkled red face of his child and felt his heart expand in a way he had never experienced before. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Nora, he is perfect." They named him Robert Thomas Barrett, after Tom's father and Tom himself. Robert was a hungry, vocal baby who kept them up many nights, but neither Tom nor Nora minded. They took turns walking him around the house, singing to him, and marveling at every tiny feature and gesture. Watching Nora with their son, Tom fell in love with her all over again. She was a natural mother, somehow balancing the demands of caring for an infant with running the general store and helping manage the ranch. Tom did his best to support her, taking on more of the household tasks and spending as much time as possible with Robert so that Nora could focus on her business when she needed to. As Robert grew from an infant into a toddler, the Barrett household was filled with laughter and love. He was a curious, energetic child who seemed to inherit the best qualities of both his parents. He had Tom's blue eyes and Nora's determination, and he kept them constantly entertained with his antics. The general store continued to thrive, and in 1885, Nora finally opened her second location in the mining town of Leadville, about 40 miles north of Aspen. Tom helped her establish the new store, hiring reliable staff and setting up supply lines. The venture was risky, but it paid off, and soon the Leadville store was as successful as the Aspen location. The ranch also prospered, with their horse breeding program gaining a reputation throughout Colorado. They expanded their herd, built new stables, and hired additional ranch hands to help with the increased workload. Tom found that he enjoyed the business side of ranching more than he had expected, especially with Nora as his partner to help strategize and plan. In 1886, their daughter was born. They named her Grace Elizabeth Barrett, and she was as different from her brother as night from day. Where Robert was boisterous and outgoing, Grace was quiet and thoughtful. She preferred books to horses, and would spend hours sitting with Nora in the general store, watching her mother work and asking endless questions about how things operated. Tom adored both his children, though he sometimes felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of raising them. He was determined to be a better father than his own father had been, to listen to his children and support their dreams rather than dictating what they should become. Nora was his partner in parenting just as she was in everything else, and together they navigated the challenges of raising a young family while managing their expanding business empire. As the years passed, Aspen grew from a small mountain town into a more substantial community. New businesses opened, new families arrived, and the town gradually became more connected to the wider world. Tom and Nora were pillars of the community, respected for their business acumen and their commitment to helping others. They donated money to build a new schoolhouse, supported the church, and helped families in need during hard times. Jack Morrison married Sarah Jenkins in 1887, and Tom stood up as his best man, just as Jack had been Tom's. The two couples became inseparable, raising their children together and supporting each other through the ups and downs of life. Sarah and Nora became particularly close friends, often working together on community projects and sharing the joys and challenges of motherhood. The duel with Marcus Dalton faded into memory, becoming just another story in the history of Aspen. Sometimes visitors to the town would hear about it and ask Tom or Nora for details, but they generally deflected such questions, preferring to focus on the present and future rather than dwell on the past. Marcus himself was never heard from again. Rumors occasionally surfaced that he had gone to California or perhaps back east, but no one knew for sure, and after a while, people stopped asking. He had been a brief disruption in the life of Aspen, a cautionary tale about the dangers of pride and obsession, and then he was gone. In 1890, when Robert was 7 and Grace was 4, Tom and Nora decided to build the house they had talked about on their engagement day. The ranch house had served them well, but with 2 children and plans for more, they needed something larger. They chose a site halfway between the ranch and town, with spectacular views of the mountains and easy access to both the store and the ranch operations. The new house was a beautiful 2-story structure with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. It had large windows to let in the mountain light, a spacious kitchen where Nora could work, and a study where Tom could manage the ranch accounts. Upstairs were 4 bedrooms, one for Tom and Nora, one each for the children, and one for the additional children they hoped to have. They moved in during the summer, and on their first night in the new house, Tom and Nora sat on the front porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Robert was playing in the yard while Grace sat nearby with her favorite doll, and everything felt right with the world. "Did you ever imagine we would end up here?" Nora asked, leaning against Tom's shoulder. "I always hoped," Tom replied, "but hoping and knowing are different things. There were so many times when I thought I had lost you for good." "You never lost me," Nora said. "Even when I was angry at you, even when I was confused about what I wanted, some part of me always knew we would end up together." "I am glad you gave me a second chance," Tom said. "Or was it a third chance? I lost count," Nora laughed. "However many chances it took. We got there in the end, and that is what matters." Their third child, a son they named William James Barrett, was born in 1891. He was a healthy, happy baby who seemed to take after Tom's side of the family in temperament and appearance. With 3 children, the house felt full and alive, and Tom and Nora thrived in the organized chaos of family life. The general stores continued to do well, and in 1893, Nora opened a 3rd location in Denver. This was their most ambitious venture yet, requiring significant capital investment and careful planning. Tom supported her fully, even taking on more of the child-rearing responsibilities so that Nora could travel to Denver regularly to oversee the new store. The Denver location was different from the Aspen and Leadville stores, catering to a more urban clientele with different needs and preferences. Nora adapted her business model accordingly, offering a wider variety of goods and focusing on customer service. The store became popular with Denver residents, and soon it was the most profitable of the 3 locations. Tom was proud of Nora's success, never once feeling threatened or diminished by her accomplishments. He had learned long ago that her success was their success, and that supporting her dreams enriched both of their lives. He ran the ranch with increasing skill and confidence, and together, they built a business empire that provided security and opportunities for their family and their employees. In 1895, their 4th child was born, another daughter they named Catherine Rose Barrett. She was a beautiful baby with Nora's green eyes and a sunny disposition that endeared her to everyone. With 4 children ranging from 12 years old to newborn, the Barrett household was lively and often chaotic. But Tom and Nora would not have had it any other way. As the century drew to a close, Tom sometimes reflected on how different his life had turned out from what he had once imagined. He had thought being a successful rancher and eventually marrying Nora would be the sum total of his ambitions. But life with Nora had expanded his horizons in ways he never anticipated. He had become a businessman, a father, a pillar of the community, and most importantly, a true partner to an extraordinary woman. The scars from the duel with Marcus had long since faded to thin white lines on Tom's ribs, barely visible and easily forgotten. But the lessons from that time remained. He had learned that love was not about grand gestures or proving yourself through violence. It was about showing up every day, listening, supporting, and being willing to grow and change. It was about partnership and respect and building something together that was stronger than either person could create alone. Robert grew into a thoughtful young man who shared his mother's head for business. He helped manage the stores as soon as he was old enough, learning from Nora and developing his own ideas for expansion and improvement. Grace became an avid reader and eventually expressed interest in becoming a teacher, much to Tom and Nora's delight. William showed a natural talent with horses and spent most of his free time working with the breeding program at the ranch. And Catherine, the baby of the family, charmed everyone with her infectious laughter and kind heart. In 1900, on a warm June evening, Tom and Nora celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner on the porch of their home. The children were inside with their grandmother, who had come to visit for the summer, and Tom and Nora had rare time alone together. 15 years, Nora said, raising her glass of wine in a toast. Can you believe it? Sometimes it feels like we just got married yesterday, Tom replied, clinking his glass against hers. Other times it feels like we have been together forever. Both of those things can be true, Nora said with a smile. I love you just as much now as I did on our wedding day, maybe more because now I know all your flaws and I love you anyway. Tom laughed. I could say the same about you, though I am not sure you have any flaws. You are pretty much perfect. Oh, please, Nora said, rolling her eyes. I am stubborn, demanding, and I work too much. Those are just the flaws I am willing to admit to. Okay, so you are stubborn, Tom conceded. But that stubbornness helped you build 3 successful stores and raise 4 incredible children while also helping me run a ranch. I would say that is a pretty productive flaw. Nora reached across the table and took his hand. We make a good team, Tom Barrett. Whatever challenges we have faced them together, and we always will. Always, Tom agreed, squeezing her hand. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Tom thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. All the trials and triumphs, the mistakes and the growth. He thought about the young man he had been when he first proposed to Nora in that saloon, so certain of what he wanted but so ignorant of what it truly meant to love and be loved. What are you thinking about? Nora asked, reading the contemplative expression on his face. I am thinking about how lucky I am, Tom said honestly, and how close I came to losing you because of my own stupidity. Ancient history, Nora said. We both made mistakes back then. What matters is that we learned from them and built something beautiful together. I just want you to know that I never take any of this for granted, Tom said. You, the children, the life we have built, I am grateful for it every single day. I know, Nora said softly, and I feel the same way. You have been everything I hoped for in a partner, Tom. You have supported my dreams, shared the burden of raising our family, and loved me through every phase of our lives. I could not have asked for a better husband or a better friend. They stayed on the porch late into the night, talking and laughing and reminiscing about the years they had shared. It was one of those perfect moments that Tom knew he would remember for the rest of his life, a crystallization of everything that mattered. As the years continued to pass, the Barrett family remained close and prosperous. Robert eventually married a lovely young woman named Elizabeth Chambers and took over management of the Denver store, moving there with his wife and starting his own family. Grace attended college in Denver, one of the first women from Aspen to do so, and returned home to become a teacher at the schoolhouse her parents had helped build. William stayed at the ranch, working alongside Tom and eventually becoming his father's partner in the horse breeding operation. Catherine showed an artistic talent and spent hours painting the mountain landscapes she loved. Tom and Nora became grandparents in 1904 when Robert and Elizabeth had their first child, a daughter they named Nora Rose Barrett after both grandmothers. The arrival of their first grandchild was a profoundly joyful experience, and Tom and Nora doted on the baby whenever Robert brought her to visit. In 1906, Jack Morrison passed away suddenly from a heart condition, leaving Sarah and their 3 children devastated. Tom and Nora supported Sarah through her grief, just as Jack and Sarah had supported them through so many challenges over the years. The loss of his best friend hit Tom hard, reminding him that life was precious and time was not infinite. "We need to make the most of every day," Tom told Nora after Jack's funeral. "None of us know how much time we have." "We already do make the most of every day," Nora replied gently. "We love each other, we love our children, and we work to make the world a little better than we found it. What more can anyone do?" Tom knew she was right, but Jack's death still shook him. It made him more conscious of expressing his love and appreciation for his family, more deliberate about spending time with the people who mattered most. As Tom and Nora moved into their 50s, they began to slow down slightly, though neither showed any signs of actually retiring. Nora still oversaw the general stores, though she relied more heavily on Robert and other trusted managers. Tom still worked the ranch, though William handled more of the daily operations. They spent more time with their grandchildren, who were growing in number as their other children married and started families of their own. Grace married a fellow teacher named David Preston in 1908, and they settled in Aspen, where they both taught at the schoolhouse. William married a rancher's daughter named Anna Mitchell in 1910, and they built a house on the ranch property and continued expanding the horse breeding program. Catherine, the youngest, married a Denver businessman named Henry Caldwell in 1912, and they split their time between Denver and Aspen. By 1915, Tom and Nora had 8 grandchildren, with more on the way. Their home was frequently filled with the sound of children's laughter, and both Tom and Nora reveled in the chaos and joy of a large extended family. On a crisp autumn morning in October 1915, Tom and Nora took a walk through the Aspen Grove where Tom had proposed to her so many years before. The leaves were brilliant gold, shimmering in the breeze, and the air smelled of pine and earth in coming winter. "You remember the first time I proposed to you?" Tom asked as they walked hand in hand through the trees. "How could I forget?" Nora replied with a laugh. "You got down on one knee right there, and I was so scared and so happy all at once. I was terrified you would say no again," Tom admitted, "that you would tell me I had burned all my bridges and there was no coming back." "I almost did," Nora confessed. "Not because I did not love you, but because I was afraid. Afraid of giving up my independence, afraid of being disappointed, afraid of so many things. But then I looked at you kneeling there, looking up at me with such hope and love in your eyes, and I knew that not saying yes would be the biggest mistake of my life." "I am glad you took the risk," Tom said, stopping and pulling her into his arms. "These past 33 years with you have been the greatest adventure of my life." 33 years, Nora marveled. "Where did the time go?" "Into our children and grandchildren," Tom said. "Into the businesses we built and the community we helped shape. Into every morning I woke up next to you, and every evening we sat on the porch watching the sunset. The time went into a life well lived." Nora looked up at him, her green eyes still as bright and intelligent as they had been when she was a young woman running her father's store. There were lines on her face now and gray in her auburn hair, but to Tom she was as beautiful as ever. "I love you, Tom Barrett," she said. "I loved you then, I love you now, and I will love you for whatever time we have left." "And I love you, Nora Barrett," Tom replied. "You are my heart, my partner, my best friend. Everything good in my life comes back to you." They kissed beneath the golden aspen trees, two people who had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs, who had built a life together through hard work and compromise and unwavering love. The boy who had once challenged a rival to a duel was long gone, replaced by a man who understood that true strength came from partnership and respect. The girl who had refused a public proposal had become a woman who had built a business empire while raising a family and supporting her husband's dreams. As they walked back toward their home, Tom thought about the legacy they would leave behind. It was not just the businesses or the ranch or the material wealth they had accumulated. It was the family they had created, the love they had nurtured, and the example they had set for their children and grandchildren about what a true partnership looked like. That evening, the entire Barrett clan gathered at Tom and Nora's house for Sunday dinner, a tradition that had started when Robert married and had continued ever since. The table was crowded with children and grandchildren, with conversation and laughter filling every corner of the house. Tom sat at the head of the table, with Nora at his right hand, and looked around at the faces of the people he loved most in the world. Robert was discussing business strategies with his mother, their heads bent together as they solved some problem with the Denver store. Grace was helping her youngest daughter with her dinner while simultaneously answering questions from her eldest about a book they were reading. William and Anna were tag-teaming to keep their three rambunctious sons from causing too much chaos. Catherine was showing her father her latest painting, a beautiful landscape of the mountains at sunset. This was what mattered, Tom thought. Not the mistakes he had made in his youth, not the duel or the public humiliation or any of the other dramatic events that had seemed so important at the time. What mattered was this: a table full of family, a life full of love, and a partner who had walked beside him through it all. After dinner, when the children were playing outside and the adults were cleaning up, Tom pulled Nora aside for a private moment. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" Nora asked, drying her hands on a dish towel. "For saying yes," Tom said. "For giving me a second chance. For building this life with me, for everything." Nora smiled and reached up to cup his face in her hands. "You do not need to thank me, Tom. Loving you has been the easiest and best decision I ever made." They stood together in the kitchen of their home, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived, and Tom felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude. The journey had not always been easy. There had been struggles and disappointments, conflicts and compromises. But through it all, they had held onto each other and the love that bound them together. As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Tom and Nora rejoined their family on the front porch. Grandchildren climbed into their laps, children shared stories of their weeks, and the sound of laughter echoed across the valley. It was an ordinary evening, the kind that happened hundreds of times in the life of a family, but it was also extraordinary in its simple perfection. Tom Barrett, the cowboy who had once dueled for love, had found something far more valuable than victory in a gunfight. He had found a partnership that enriched every aspect of his life, a love that deepened with each passing year, and a family that would carry forward the values he and Nora had worked so hard to instill. He had learned that true courage was not about facing down an opponent with a gun, but about showing up every day for the people you loved, admitting your mistakes, and always striving to be better. And Nora Barrett, the woman who had refused him once in front of the whole town, had found a man worthy of her trust and love. She had built a business empire without sacrificing her identity or her dreams. She had raised a family that reflected the best of both her and Tom. She had proven that a woman could be independent and strong while also being a loving wife and mother. She had shown her daughters and granddaughters that they could chart their own course in life, that they did not have to choose between ambition and love, that they could have both if they found the right partner. As the years continued to pass, Tom and Nora aged gracefully together, their love story becoming something of a legend in Aspen. Young couples would ask them for advice, wanting to know the secret to their long and happy marriage. Tom and Nora would always exchange a knowing glance before answering. Communication, Nora would say. Never assume you know what the other person wants. Ask, listen, and really hear what they are saying. Respect, Tom would add. Your partner is not your property or your project. They are a complete person with their own dreams and desires, and you need to honor that. Partnership, they would say together. Marriage is not about one person serving the other. It is about two people working together to build something neither could create alone. But the real secret, the one they kept to themselves, was simpler than any of that. The secret was choosing each other every single day, even when it was hard, even when they were frustrated or tired or overwhelmed. The secret was looking at each other after decades together, and still seeing the person they fell in love with, still feeling that flutter of excitement when they walked into a room. The secret was love, pure and enduring and strong enough to weather any storm. Tom and Nora Barrett lived long, full lives, surrounded by the people they loved and the legacy they had built together. When Tom finally passed away in 1928 at the age of 71, Nora was holding his hand, just as she had held it through every important moment of their life together. His last words to her were, "Thank you for saying yes," and she smiled through her tears and whispered back, "Thank you for asking." Nora lived another 5 years after Tom's death, managing the stores and spending time with her children and grandchildren. She never remarried, saying that she had already had the love of her life and nothing could compare to what she and Tom had shared. When she passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1933 at the age of 73, her family took comfort in knowing that she and Tom were together again. They were buried side by side in the Aspen cemetery, beneath the shade of aspen trees and with a clear view of the mountains they both loved. Their headstone was simple, bearing their names and dates and a single inscription chosen by their children. Partners in all things, together forever. The Barrett family continued to thrive for generations, carrying forward the values Tom and Nora had instilled. The general stores remained successful businesses, passed down through the family. The ranch continued to produce quality horses, and became one of the most respected operations in Colorado. And every Sunday, as many Barretts as could gather would have dinner together, maintaining the tradition Tom and Nora had started and honoring the legacy of two people who had shown them what true love looked like. In the end, the story of Tom and Nora Barrett was not about a public refusal or a dramatic duel, though those events had certainly shaped their journey. It was about two people who found each other, lost their way, and then found their way back again. It was about learning and growing and becoming better versions of themselves for each other. It was about building a life of meaning and purpose and love that extended far beyond their own years on Earth. It was, quite simply, a love story, one that began with a mistake, was tested by pride and competition, and ultimately triumphed through humility, respect, and an unwavering commitment to partnership. And it was a love story that would be told in Aspen for generations to come, inspiring others to fight for what mattered, to admit when they were wrong, and to never give up on finding a love worth fighting for. The aspen trees still grow in that special grove where Tom proposed for the second time, their white bark marked with the carved initials of countless couples who have come to hear the story and add their own love to the legacy of that place. And on autumn days when the leaves turn golden and shimmer in the breeze, locals swear they can sometimes see an old cowboy and his beloved wife walking hand in hand beneath the trees, still together, still in love, still partners in all things.